take me through like a day in the life of an NHS worker. Is it super, super stressful? Because that's what my other friends that are doctors have said. It's quite bad.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty stressful. And I think a lot of people think I left because of the stress, and
Mm.
partly, but then running your own business comes with like huge stresses anyway. They're just in a different shape or form. So it would depend where you worked. So I was a GP in lots of different places, and different patient populations, different demographics bring different challenges, but also how that practice manages their patients. So
Mm-hmm.
each GP practice is like its own little independent business, and therefore they can start to influence patient decisions and patient behavior. So one example of that would be one place I worked, it would be bring in us all your problems and we're going to do your bloods and we're going to do everything in that 10 minutes. Next place I work, it was like one patient per appointment and one problem.
Mm.
So you can see how you can start to influence change there, but stuff just backs up because ultimately there aren't enough doctors, and healthcare professionals as a whole tend to be givers as people. So they want to over deliver. They tend to not meet their own needs. So they're maybe not eating well themselves. They're maybe not managing their stress. They're very unlikely to be leaving work on time. They're probably seeing people at home doing home visits on their lunch break whilst eating a sandwich, driving there. Yep, did that many, many, many times. And therefore, it's often the professionals that are working within the NHS that are burnt out, who are also seeing patients that are burnt out.
Mm.
So, how can we influence behaviour change when we're not leading by example? Well, we don't create behaviour change, we just hand out pills. So, okay, your HbA1c, which is your average blood sugar over the last kind of 2 to 3 months, say that is 46. Okay, well, you've got a diagnosis of pre-diabetes. You might get type 2 diabetes. You should improve your diet and you should start exercising. And that's just kind of the blanket approach. And that information is often given by the receptionist because the doctors don't always have the time to sit down and have that conversation, which is just so, so sad. So
Mm-hmm.
the patient then goes on to develop type 2 diabetes, and then they get a medication or a tablet because the blood sugar will continue to climb up. So we're not looking at like really informing people, not just with what to do with their health, because eating better, we all kind of know we should eat better, but how do you actually do that? Like there's a whole kind of health psychology, behavior change aspect that isn't even touched on within the NHS. And honestly, I don't think it can be, just because of the way things are set up. There just isn't the funding for health prevention in order to catch these things early on. And therefore 10, 20, 30 years down the line, they manifest as strokes, heart attacks, which is causing huge disease burden on the individual and morbidity and mortality, but also on the NHS. Then it starts to cost 10, 20, 30,000 pounds.
Mm.
So yeah, you can see like if you zoom all the way out where the cracks are, but how do you fix them? I really don't know. I genuinely think the people who are within the system are trying their absolute best. And I had like this accidental / lucky escape. Like I'm not really supposed to be doing this stuff. It all just
Mm.
happened as a bit of a coincidence. Although I truly believe that what's for you will come to you, and it maybe would have happened eventually. But yeah, I wanted to be a GP partner. That was like my lifelong goal.
Yeah. And do you feel, I suppose it's a different type of stress. Like, I suppose I'm in business myself, and when you're in control of the problems, like if you can identify a problem in your business and then say, right, I know how to fix that, or I'll figure out how to fix that, that alleviates a lot of anxiety, because all of a sudden you say, listen, I know that there's a problem, but I understand how I can fix it. And that's that. Whereas the NHS, it's almost like I can see the problems, but I don't have the authority, or I don't know who to speak to that can implement those procedural changes that can make it happen.
Yeah, you're absolutely bang on. There isn't any real kind of control.
Mm.
So you're just like this pawn on a chessboard, and you're one of like many, 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 many pawns on the chessboard, and you don't really have that influence, which is why I love where I am now, because I have freedom to do whatever I really want. Of course, it needs to be good medical practice
Yeah.
and it needs to be justified because I'm still licensed as a doctor and I have to do my appraisal and all of these things, and I need to practice safely. But yeah, I've got so much freedom and flexibility and time. I really
Mm.
get to give people time, which at the beginning, they find it really strange. They don't want to bother me. And, I'm almost reaching out to them to ask, what else can we do here? What else do you need? What's going on? Give me an update today.
Mm-hmm. And there's definitely a young kind of flood of doctors that, or even they get educated in Scotland because it's free, and then they move to Australia. And like I know people that have done this, and God bless them, that they're earning double, triple the amount over in Australia, and it's a better quality of life, and the system is better. So why wouldn't they? I totally understand it, but is that putting even more strain on the NHS? Do you think there should be regulation that if you were educated in Scotland, you need to work in Scotland for at least X amount of time?
Oh, yeah, this is such a great question because, see, when I first left, I felt so guilty.
Mm.
And like, I'm going to use the word ashamed because I felt that people would judge me, and, I was going private, and would people think I was doing it for money, and, all of those types of things. And when you're educated in Scotland and you go to medical school or you're born in Scotland, you don't have to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
So the taxpayer is funding your qualification. And then at the end of the day, I left. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
am I allowed to do that? So, I mean, yeah, they could put regulation in, but what would happen? People would just burn out. I think instead of putting regulation in, the biggest thing that the NHS could do isn't just, putting the focus more on preventative healthcare and health education and things like that, but it's changing the culture for the workers. It's helping the workers be seen and be validated and really caring for them and making sure they get their breaks and making sure they finish on time instead of just like adding more stuff on their plate, because all the stuff on social media and, well, just in the press, full stop, it talks about general practice and slagging off GPs and they're this and they're that and they're missing this and that and the next thing. And I'm sure there are bad GPs out there. I'm yet to meet one, honestly, professionally or personally. It's usually a system problem rather than a person problem. The whole thing just makes me feel super sad.